This way just for $10, Addison? That's surprisingly petty of you, she retorted, clearly reluctant to part with the cash. I had anticipated this reaction, knowing Susanna's track record of not repaying me on numerous occasions before. You've said that before, but you never followed through. You currently owe me over $100. Enough is enough, I stated firmly, feeling a hint of frustration. Susanna's frown deepened, and she glared at me like a stubborn child. However, I was determined not to back down. Today, Susanna's behavior was quite troublesome. Whether it was hitching a ride to the station when I was heading to work or conveniently forgetting her wallet during shopping trips, her antics seemed endless. Confronting her about it only resulted in childish sulking, with her trying to shift the blame onto me by mentioning Johnny's income and implying I was overly frugal. It was beyond frustrating. If only she could act like a normal friend instead of this. On the day of our shopping trip, Susanna hopped into the car ahead of us, quipping, "Did you forget anything, like your wallet?" I responded curtly, "You should check too," before urging Johnny to start the car. With Cliff safely with my parents, we made our way to the wholesale store, where we found it jam-packed with shoppers. Despite the chaos, I kept our plan firmly in mind. However, we wouldn't have needed the plan if Susanna simply paid her own way. "Wow, look at all this food! They have such a variety," Susanna exclaimed, enthusiastically piling her cart with bags. "Try to keep your items separate," I suggested, but she waved it off, saying we could sort it out later. Despite my warning, my cart soon overflowed with items. I regretted grabbing a cart in the first place, only intending to pick up a few things. It seemed she had no intention of paying for herself, oblivious to our silent frustrations as she continued browsing without checking prices. As we approached the checkout, Susanna's familiar habits resurfaced. Something seems off." Johnny and I exchanged concerned glances. Susanna fumbled through her purse, looking expectantly at us as if waiting for a prompt. When we remained silent, she couldn't hold back any longer and loudly declared, "Oops, I left my wallet at home." Johnny and I exchanged a knowing look, deciding it was time to put our plan into motion. "Oh, I forgot to grab something," Johnny chimed in as we stood in line. I went along with Johnny's plan, nodding in agreement. Susanna, who had been rummaging through her purse, turned to us. "Could you go get it?" she asked. "But what if you can't find it?" I responded, "I know where it is." "Susanna, can you watch the cart while we go back?" I asked, pushing the cart towards her. Susanna instinctively took hold of it. "Huh?" she questioned. "We'll be quick. You sure you'll be okay? Remember, I don't have my wallet," I reminded her. Susanna reluctantly agreed to wait in line while we went to fetch the forgotten item. Johnny and I exchanged a subtle smile, making sure Susanna didn't notice. We then discreetly hid behind shelves and people, keeping a close watch on her. It seemed our plan was unfolding as expected. How long would she wait? With the cart full of items, she couldn't easily abandon them when it was her turn. Suppressing a mischievous chuckle, we remembered how Susanna always relied on my wallet. There were instances when she would make excuses to leave early if I refused to pay. Recalling this, Johnny suggested we turn the tables on her. However, we had agreed that if Susanna made any attempt to pay, we would let it slide this time. But true to form, the moment she reached the checkout, she announced she'd left her wallet behind, seemingly banking on us to foot the bill. It was a predictable move, especially considering her lingering resentment over the last lunch money. Sensing that we weren't returning, Susanna began to look around nervously, staying in line, perhaps contemplating her next move if we did come back. As the line advanced, Johnny and I decided to proceed with the next step of our plan. "Sorry, Susanna, but my mom just called with an urgent matter. You know she's looking after the kids and can't leave the house, so we need to head back home," I informed Susanna over the phone. Susanna's voice betrayed her shock and panic. Wait. What about paying? I forgot my wallet too." "Please hurry back and pay before you leave. Nowadays, you can pay with your phone, right? Figure something out. And most of the shopping is yours anyway." If you don't want to pay for our few items, just remove them from the cart. It should be quick, since we only picked up 2 or 3 things. Susanna's voice grew increasingly irritated. I don't have any means to pay. Come back now, or at least leave Johnny here. Johnny interjected, taking my phone with an exasperated tone. I need to help with the heavy lifting. Sorry, but you'll have to take a cab back. It's urgent. Or maybe get your husband Phil to pick you up. Susanna was left speechless. We knew she was wary of Phil, as we had heard from other local mom friends about her previous encounters where Phil had sharply scolded her. Despite this, she hadn't learned her lesson and continued her schemes behind Phil's back. That's the situation. If you're unsure how to use your phone to pay, ask the staff. They should be able to assist you. As that register accepts mobile payments, I explained. Susanna clenched her teeth. Did you set me up? Of course not. Isn't it normal to pay for your own things? Why would I set you up? I responded calmly. Susanna fell silent, visibly frustrated. We ended the call with her and drove off, imagining Susanna causing a scene at the register, sharing a laugh. The following day, Susanna showed up at my doorstep, clearly still upset about what happened the day before. After enduring several rounds of persistent doorbell ringing, I reluctantly answered. There she stood, her face flushed with anger. It was awful to leave me stranded like that. I demand compensation, she declared, her tone leaving me skeptical. As she launched into a tirade about the events of the previous day, claiming she had panicked and insisting I owed her double the amount, I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at her demand. Did you even pay for our items? She questioned angrily, seemingly oblivious to the absurdity of her own words. Why would I pay for your shopping? I responded incredulously, causing Susanna's fury to intensify. You only covered your own purchases. Why the sudden anger? I feigned innocence, but Susanna's frustration reached a boiling point. Being left behind was deeply upsetting. It caused me emotional distress. You should reimburse me for the shopping, the taxi fare, and the inconvenience. After all, you invited me to join you, she insisted, twisting the story to suit her narrative, frowning at her unreasonable demands, especially her attempt to shift blame onto us by portraying herself as an innocent victim. I couldn't help but feel absurd for even entertaining this conversation. Susanna's audacity left me astounded. Unfazed by my reaction, Susanna issued a threat. If you refuse to pay, I'll spread rumors about you to the neighbors. Think about the consequences for your fancy house. Pay up if you want to avoid that. Confronted with Susanna's unreasonable ultimatum, I realized it was time to reassess our relationship. Just then, a familiar voice broke the tension. At the sound of it, Susanna's face drained of color, and she swiftly turned around. There stood Johnny and Phil, engaged in conversation as they strolled together. What's going on? Phil inquired, sensing the tension in the air. Oh, it's about yesterday, Johnny began, shooting Susanna a meaningful glance. When I mentioned that, he trailed off, leaving Phil curious. Johnny proceeded to recount the events of their trip to the wholesale store with Susanna and how they had to leave abruptly due to an unforeseen circumstance. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to buy anything in the end, Johnny concluded, sharing a chuckle with Phil. That's too bad. Phil remarked with a sympathetic smile, unaware of the tension that had transpired. Turning to Susanna, Phil questioned her. What's your side of the story? Suddenly stripped of her previous assertiveness, Susanna stumbled over her words, attempting to formulate a response. Sensing her discomfort, I decided to fill Phil in on Susanna's demands from earlier, noting how deeply hurt she had seemed. I'm genuinely sorry, but asking for compensation and shopping money seems a bit excessive, I expressed, causing Susanna's face to pale. What do you mean? Susanna protested, her voice tinged with desperation. That's not how it is. But wasn't that the purpose of your visit today? Or was there another reason? Phil interjected, his tone curious yet perceptive. Caught off guard by Phil's directness, Susanna lapsed into an uneasy silence, her frustration palpable. Phil, sensing that something wasn't adding up, frowned in suspicion. Noticing Susanna's pleading gaze, she turned to me for support, but I remained silent. Next time, we won't leave you behind. Let's go shopping together again, all right? I suggested with a faint smile, attempting to diffuse the tension. Okay, okay, Susanna replied hastily, her face drained of color as she hurriedly made her exit. Later, Phil confronted Susanna once more. This wasn't the first time such an incident had occurred, and his frustration was entirely justified. He had personally looked into Susanna's actions after receiving multiple complaints from other local moms, which only fueled his anger. Confronting Susanna about her exploitation of others, he discovered her misuse of household funds on luxury items, which had led to discussions of divorce. Desperate to salvage their marriage, Susanna pleaded with Phil, but he felt betrayed and ultimately decided to kick her out for the sake of their child. Eventually, they went through with the divorce proceedings, with Susanna returning to her family's home to assist with farming. With the troublesome influence of Susanna gone, the neighborhood regained its peace. Nevertheless, we maintained our friendship with Phil and continued to offer our support whenever needed.